and we put it, you know, like 0 meaning just touching it, doing no force, and 100 being pushing it as hard as I can, I don't think there's a time when you need to be pushing more than a 70. And in fact, I think most of the time you should be pushing a 40. Does that make sense? Right? So we want to get as much fine tuning of our action as possible. And if we feel like we're approaching a 7 or an 8, we might be doing the wrong thing. Right? Because we don't necessarily have to push really hard to get our job done. We should be pushing smart. Get the side, get it pressed down into our dome, get the sides connected to the wheel head. All right. Feel free to ask questions as we go. So coning and doming, when I have I think 3.5, 4 pounds of clay here. So I'm going to start on the top, and I'm going to bring the top in a little bit. Always keep the classical cone shape, and then I'm going to bring the bottom in. When we talked about just now how much force to add, you want to add enough force to see the material responding, and then wait for the clay to move out of your way, right? The where your force is going to affect where the clay is going. Watch the shape of the piece of clay as you're going. Don't just blindly push. Try and change the shape of it, and we call it coning and doming because we want to go between those two shapes, a cone and a dome. Pushing into the oncoming clay at all times, lubricating as I go down. Don't expect it to be done on your first cone and dome. Done is when the sides feel bump free and the clay feels on center. All right, making a bowl. The first decision I want to make once I have my piece of clay wobble free is how wide of a foot do I want on my bowl, right? And I'm going to center my piece of clay as wide as I want the foot on my bowl to be, and I think that's what I'm going to live with. I think of my bowl as a handle, so you know I have large hands, and I think I have to make a bowl small enough so that everybody can use the foot as a handle. So I use my hand as a guide. Now I'm going to dive in. Remembering dead center is deadly. The work is going to happen with this thumb, but the direction of it is going to be controlled with this finger. I want to make sure my thumb doesn't slip onto dead center, so I'm using this wagging finger to keep it a little bit to the side as I dive in, and I go as far as my thumb can reach, and now I'm starting to mangle the top edge of this, so I've gone as far as I'm going to go with that thumb move, and I switch to my heavy metal where my 2 middle fingers are going to go in, support staff on top, and I'm going to dive until I think I'm as deep as I need to go. Then I'm going to stop and grab my needle tool. Do you have a needle tool I can steal? Thank you very much. Stab and come out. I've gone too far. It's too thin. But the way I do bowls, when I pull it open, is I come up instead of coming out flat, right? So I'm going to come up pretty steep so I can move clay back down and re-thicken my bottom. So I want plenty of water as I'm opening it. Instead of the normal pry it open like so, I am going to turn my wrist as I come out so my bottom gets thicker as I come out. So it's actually quite a bit of this action. And I'm just going to rotate my hand out, and I'm prying that open. And now I'll squeeze all the water out of my sponge and take a look at what we have on the inside. So I have my too thin of a bottom, and if you guys can you see in here? It's too thin there at that bottom section, and it's sloped up, and I'm going to slowly move clay down into that space, and at the same time sort of think about that beginning curve, you know, from the center of my bowl. So I'm sort of doing that curve. I want it steeper than what I want because I can make it more shallow when we get to shaping our bowl. Anytime I move clay into a cavity, I will stab and make sure I haven't trapped slip or air into that cavity, and then recompress all the way to the center until that clay feels like it's as packed down as everything else. All right, step 4 is normally collar it in a little bit and make it tip in and fix our rim. But because we're going bowl, I'm going to go ahead and allow my rim to be wider than the base, right? But if I was doing something besides a bowl, I'd want it to be narrower up here than it is down here. But I do want a delicious rim on this piece, and right now it's sloped down like this. I've got this groove in here, I've got this groove here, I've got this another groove here. I want it to be a nice straight wall all the way down with no variation and as thick as what's below it. And I am holding a space with these 2 fingers, and my drawbridge comes down and packs that clay down into the space that I've created here. All right, so step number 4 is done. We're ready for our pulls. I've been trying to get you guys to begin your pull with a gather from the inside, pushing to the outside. On bowls though, my bottom is like way up here, right? And I don't want to push out way down here, but I do want to use some of this clay. So I will often begin my first pull. This finger is going to hold and prevent the clay from bunching back up, and I'm going to scoop a little bit of clay with my outside finger. And it's a bad habit to get into for other forms, but we can gather that clay up there. Why do I consider it a bad habit? Because it often curves up the bottom of something we want it to keep flat. That being said, if you want to curve up your bottom, maybe that's a move to do. All right, so now I'm going to do my pull from bottom to top. Don't try and get your final thickness on your first pull. You know, stay kind of thick on your first pull. Always make sure your rim is delicious before your next pull. Make sure the water content on the inside is nice and even. Then we go for our second pull. I'm going to start in here. Now I'm going to do my gather from the inside, pushing out. I'm going to push out, define my thickness for the next pull. And as soon as it's gone around enough. So I talked a little bit about, like the amount of force we use being, from 0 to 100, and we shouldn't be often using more than a 40. When you're pulling, a lot of that is going to go to 0, right? Because if you're holding a space and the clay has gone all the way around, theoretically, the only thing you should be feeling is the clay sliding past your fingers, right? Because we're holding a thickness as we come up. All right, let's sort of feel this out a little bit. I think I have maybe a little bit more clay here I can bring up. All right, but this is about as thin as I want to go right now. I'm going to make sure my rim is delicious. And now I'm going to take my wooden knife and cut the skirt off the outside before I start shaping this into a bowl, because it's going to be harder to reach that clay down there. And I'm going to set my knife up against the side, and I'm going to slide down and cut off the amount of skirt I think I need to. I don't want to really undercut it too much because some of that clay is going to be supporting the bottom curve of my bowl. And take that extra clay off, set that aside, and now we're shaping, and I guess I'm going to use this rib. So which rib do I like? I like a rib that is not flexible while I'm working in the beginning, because a flexible rib will sometimes put flat spots in. That being said, I love this flexible metal ribbon. I use it a lot, and sometimes I will use it on the inside of the bowl. But while I'm going, I like to have a stiff wood or plastic. I like it to have as few corners and edges as possible. Like this would be a challenging bowl making rib. All right, we have a flower pot-ish shape. Now we're gonna make a bowl. Our job is to get our rim out as far as we want it to be before we have a curve all the way to the bottom. So I'm gonna start on the top and I'm gonna pry that rim out, and I wanna stop before this gets horizontal, right? I don't want this clay to be horizontal right here. And then I'm gonna work my way in and push that clay out a little bit. When I'm working this rib, we've talked about, you know, the wet fish handshake being a terrible thing, right? Clay needs tone, right? But our rib needs to be at the right passing angle, right? So the clay can slide past the rib. And I actually, when I first come in contact with the clay, have a loose hold on my tool, so it pulls my tool to a passing position, and then I hold it still there, and now I have a grip on it, right? So I'm letting the clay arrange the tool a little bit, and then I have to demand the tool not move, right? So again, we want to be wider. I'm going to bring the rim out a little bit further, avoid horizontal, come in and hit that intersection. I haven't touched the outside at all, right? In fact, you can put really interesting textures on the outside with this methodology for making bowls. Bring the rim out. So we're going to say that that's as wide as I want the rim to be. And now it's all about what kind of shape do I want down here. I usually begin my bowl as a V shape, and I will go down to the bottom in almost a straight V, right? I don't always do this, but, and then I make my variation from the V shape. So now we have a curve down. Now it's a matter of getting this curve that's bumping in a little bit more bulbous, unless that was the shape that I wanted. Now, you might have noticed I have gone to my water not at all, right? I see a lot of people will take their rib and they'll come in and they'll dip their rib, and now they have a drip of water, and it's slipperier here and less slippery here, and it's gonna slip grab. If you've made that mistake, it's not the end of the world. Dry off your tool, then wring out your sponge, and now drag the water layer that's in there and make it an even water layer. The only bad thing about, you know, or the worst part about dunking in is you get an uneven water layer and you get a tool that jumps on you, and that is harder to control. So now it's about getting some of this clay down. Now, one of the many reasons I do top-down shaping on my bowls is the clay up here is much easier to move around than the clay down here, right? So if I'm coming down and I get to the bottom, I'm gonna end up not pushing the clay as far as I want, right? And then I can just go again and push the clay a little bit more and push it a little bit more. If I'm going from bottom to top, I'm pushing hard, and then I need less force as I come up, and I end up pushing out farther than what I want, right? It also ends up being a very mechanically sound way of moving a spinning cylinder of clay around, working from top to bottom. But now it's all about fine-tuning this bottom curve here, and getting this to be as nice of a curve as we want. Now, because this is a demo, I'm not going to make you watch all of that. Does somebody have a leather in their set of tools? No? They're usually on the basket with the sponges. Yeah, there's one hanging right there. Yeah, perfect. That's the one. Thank you very much. All right, bowls are a wonderful place to play with lips because we don't drink out of many of our bowls, right? Well, actually, I drink out of a lot of bowls, especially this size. So if I were making this specifically for like pho or something, and I wanted a very drinkable rim, I would just sort of round this off and make it nice and round. I could, if I wanted to, like tip the, straighten the rim up a little bit, make it a little more vertical. And one of the reasons you would want that is so you can fill it up and it doesn't splash out as much as if it's flared out, right? We can take our rim and bend it out and make a decorative, sort of flare, and that would also be helping, with walking around with a full soup bowl, right? So we can change the angle of our rim quite a bit with a leather tool once we get comfortable with it. And really what's happening is the leather is just keeping this curve nice, and I'm moving the rim around with my fingertips, right? But there's a leather in between, right? One of the things we get to do with a leather is if I want to divide this in half, I can just sort of dig my fingernail in here, and now I can have sort of something interesting going on here. Now this could potentially be a lid now, right? And this would be a big domed lid, like a Tangier. Now, if you notice my finger jumping, why is it jumping? Because I use a wet leather and I have a drip on the inside. So it's uneven on the inside. But these lips, like what do you do with a lip like this? Do you give it a little bit of a turn? Now I'm going to, for demo's sake, chop this in half so we can talk about trimming as well at this point. But I would be, detailing this curve on the inside with a fingertip to get it, really, as nice as I possibly could. I've had that question many, many times. Can you trim the inside of a bowl? And the answer is yes, you certainly can. But can you get the inside of a bowl ridiculously nice on the wheel without having to trim the inside? Yes. Trimming the outside is very easy. So this is a decorative rim. Do you want a functional rim? Would you want to turn this into a spout instead? Lots of opportunities with bowls. And then a wire. I didn't get all my tools, did I? Who set up this wheel? Thank you. All right, at trimming time, we've got that nice thick bottom, right? At trimming time, I am going to, probably take off a bunch of clay here and leave my foot, flared out, something like so. And then I want to carve out this material here. Now, the reason I'm drawing this out like this is we want to try and make this wall as even thickness as possible, right? And if you have this curve all the way on the inside and you make your bottom flat on the outside, we have a much thicker chunk of clay right here and a thinner chunk of clay here, and we will get stress cracks sometimes in the drawing here. So when I trim the outside, I always have it deeper on the inside here than I do here. So that's bowls. Any questions? If you guys want to dig in, that is fine. I've also been asked to Throw in Sections by Beth. Yes. So throwing in sections can be done in any size whatsoever. When you're throwing in sections, never throw your first section with a size piece of clay you're really uncomfortable with. You want your first section to be a well-made cylinder, right? Doesn't matter how big it is. It's going to be the foundation for everything that you put on top of it, right? Maybe you should stop and start again.